Hello, friends. Welcome to Magic, Creativity, and Life. Interesting conversations with interesting people. My name is Thorn Coyle, and I am your host. Thank you for joining me, and thank you to my Patreon supporters for paying for the recording and captioning of this series. Let's dive in. Welcome to Magic, Creativity, and Life. My name is Thorn Coyle, and today I'll be talking with Brian and Josie Parker. Brian and Josie live in Beaverton, Oregon, and are the owners of Believe in Wonder Publishing. Their lives and work are devoted to sharing imagination and creativity with young minds and inspiring a new generation of dreamers. Josie is a Southern girl at heart, and her creativity is deeply rooted in her love for helping others. She spent her adult life as a caregiver for children, adults with special needs, and as a foster parent and advocate for children in the system. Brian grew up in Alaska, then Mississippi, and has always been in love with storytelling in every medium. He earned a BFA in graphic design and illustration and an MA in writing and publishing. He spends his days working with the family, creating new and amazing stories. Victor and Kamari Parker, our chief inspiration officers, are always hard at work helping to keep Believe in Wonder focused on its mission, inspiring the young and young at heart, also jumping on their dad and driving their mom bonkers. You can find out more about Brian and Josie at believeinwonder.weebly.com. And as always, I'm at thorncoyle.com. Welcome, Brian and Josie.
Thanks for having us, Thor.
It's so great to have you here. So a little background for folks who don't know Brian and Josie's work. Brian and I met online because I got acquainted with Brian's amazing artwork via a local graphic novelist on Instagram, and I hired Brian to create character art for my Mouse Thief books. So that started our relationship, and I just really dig the vibe of you and Josie and Believe in Wonder. So I'm so happy to be talking to you about creativity and magic and wonder today.
Thank you.
I want to ask, your bio mentioned your creative roots, but I'd like both of you to talk a little bit about was your imagination sparked as children and that started your creative path, or did creativity grow out of something else? How did your connection with creativity and the fact that creativity has now taken over both your lives start?
uh, well, you want me to go first? Yeah. So, I was a storyteller even as a kid. Um, I loved being able to engage somebody in a story, have their attention, and be able to draw them in and to add details and, get laughs out of them and stuff. Most of the time, the way that showed up is that I lied a lot. That was a huge liar. Everybody knew that if I was going to engage them in the story, then probably 50% of it was going to be completely made up. And it got me in a lot of trouble, but it also made me realize how much I enjoyed that process of coming up with a tale and engaging people. And pretty much everything else kind of snowballed out of that. I learned how to draw because I couldn't get people to sit down and listen to the story sometimes.
Right.
And then I learned how to write because when you have a picture and you have a long backstory for a character, it's easier if you can kind of engage people in a written story. So pretty much all of it kind of stemmed from that little 7-year-old liar that wanted to get people's attention.
You know that Lawrence Block calls writing telling lies for fun and profit.
Yes, without a doubt. Neil Gaiman has a very similar way of looking at it, and I think Amy Tan too. So I mean, I feel like I'm in good company in that regard.
Yeah.
And for me, I think it was just a lifelong thing because I'm the oldest child of, I have 2 sisters and a brother. And so, I love the Disneys, all of the things. And in order to kind of keep my siblings interested in stuff, I would um like we would do fairy hunts outside, and on the days and long summer days in Mississippi, we tell stories and go on adventures and hunts and stuff. And those things really did feed my imagination, it fed my siblings' imaginations, and I use those same things because there was a lot of things that I didn't see, like, we didn't see any brown fairies.
Right.
So I chose to, my mom always said, if you don't see it the way you want to see it, then you should create it. And that stuck with me. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make that I'm gonna make that happen. And so yeah, I continue to do that throughout all of my life.
So you're still hunting fairies?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
And I have a little fairy area for them to come and drop by, whatever. I'm down.
Do you leave out offerings?
Oh,
Yes.
he has a fairy garden and twinkle lights, and
Definitely.
this year we're getting some little fairy houses to put out there. So yeah.
Wonderful.
They are welcome.
And I'm sure you're engaging your boys with that too.
Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
They're a little hard because they're like, I don't know, Mom. I don't think that. And I was like, whatever, you're not gonna take my fairies over here.
But they are staunch believers in Santa Claus. So.
Yes, and Krampus.
Yes, and Krampus,
but
Krampus
not
more
fairies.
so. Yeah. But yeah, they're imaginative boys. They're creative and wild in heart. So it seems like majority of our job these days is really just encouraging that truth that's inside of them, while also teaching them that, yeah, when we're in public, maybe don't jump on everything. It's going to be wild in heart, but also reserved in action.
Yeah.
So,
So how do you encourage adults to keep that sense of wonder that you're instilling in children and that both of you clearly carry into your lives and your work?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, and for me, it's mostly just asking those questions like, what type of fairy do you like, or just engaging that inspired young person in you.
Yeah.
Right.
Asking those questions and being like, well, I remember that unicorns had, not only the different color horns, but also the sparkly magic dust too. Yeah. And so then just engaging that, because then people can be like, well, when I thought of so and so, I thought this. And then you can just kind of open that conversation up, and just letting those type of things just come out and ask, and it seems to feed itself.
Yeah, because a lot of grown-ups, they still have that imaginative, creative spirit inside of them. I think that society kind of makes you repress it a little bit so that you can be an adult, quote unquote.
Right.
But also when we're in a space, just being free with your imagination and your creativity and being open about it, it gives other people license to do the thing.
Yes.
Right.
And I feel like maybe it's just we're at a really good point right now, post-pandemic. People are realizing that life is too short to repress your joy. We're seeing more little movements pop up of people that are just like, I'm just going to be openly creative, openly silly, openly free and joyful. And we love to lean into those and encourage it and be a part of it when we can. So we helped out with the beginning of the Black Fae Day movement, and which is just
blossomed. What is this, the 5th year?
Yeah. So it's become international. People are on May the 5th. They go
May 11th, I think.
May 11th this year. Yeah.
Second Saturday.
Yeah, and
And
people they just go out in full fairy regalia,
yes.
wings
So
and headdresses and beautiful gowns and and it's such a wonderful expression of not only your creativity but your kind of inner light too, because it's so inclusive of people from the LGBTQ community, the POC community, people from different cultures, and there's this intermixing and mingling and sharing of the things that inspire. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we try to lean into this stuff whenever we can and just be openly expressive about it. Also, it's great when you see kids see you as a grown up say, I love Santa Claus. And they're like, I love Santa Claus too. And they're like, okay.
it gives them license to continue to hold on to that part of themselves too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've written how many books about Saint Nick?
So
And drawn amazing art about Saint Nick and Krampus and all the rest.
oh, we did an entire series of posters inspired by strangely enough, World War II propaganda posters, which I've always thought were like really beautifully designed and very evocative. But I was like, there's all these really dark things, things that were kind of filled with fear and that kind of stuff. I was like, what if you use that design to inspire joy? And then I was like,
Yeah.
it's got to be Santa. So we've done like 15 of them now. Like, and it started with that, and then which then led to a graphic novel about Nicholas and his wife Sabina and the busy season, and then that feeds into our wondrous world. We've written a book called The Wondrous Science, which we had to do a lot of world building for, which ends up touching on to a lot of our other stories because we created this magic system where creativity is the focus of your magic. So any form of making, any form of joyful creation can turn into a thing of magic. And then I was like, that's perfect for Nicholas to live in that space. And so that led to the Epic of Nicholas Maker book series. So we've written 2 out of 5, and I'm working on book 3 right now. Mm-hmm. So and it's wonderful to have that base because all of our books pull from that concept that joyful creation is an act of magic in and of itself. So, yeah.
Why is magic important?
Oh, I mean, because the world is tough.
Yeah, the world is tough.
Reality is heavy, and I don't know.
I think that holding on to any aspect of life that can bring you a satisfaction, a deeper satisfaction in just the things that are whimsical just because you're living and you're alive and you can concentrate on that. I think that is where you will find most of the joy of life. And we're always told that we need to focus on grabbing the dollar and being so productive, and no one says, hey, you know what, this today is a very great day. Did you smell the air?
Yeah.
Roll in the grass.
Did you roll in the grass today? Did you skip? Just enjoying those moments that makes your heart happy.
Yeah.
People don't do that, and that is the magic of life right there.
Yeah.
Right.
So much of like philosophy and the concepts of mindfulness and being present is really about wonder. It's about looking at the reality that you live in and realizing that it's magical just because it exists.
Yeah.
We are creatures crafted of basic materials that the universe is created out of. So it's like the idea of magic not being a present and real thing seems contrary to the reality that we have to focus on a day-to-day basis. Life is magical in and of itself. And I feel like stories are really great places for people to explore that wonder because it takes you out of your day-to-day expectation of things and it puts you in a receptive space
Mm,
to appreciate things.
yep.
So when you're reading stories that are filled with magic and adventure and wonder and things like that, it really does leave you open and kind of in a vulnerable way, open to appreciating things.
Yep.
Yeah. So
I agree. I go for a walk every day, and the thing I love about walks is, as Josie said, I get to smell the air, I get to interact
yeah.
with this amazing world. But the thing I always pay attention to are the tiny things, right? What's that rock doing over there? Or how about, is there a bud on the branch right now? Or, you
Uh,
know, what are those dogs doing? Right? It's the tiny little things that instill that sense of magical presence and wonder in me. And then I
yeah.
bring that back into my creative process, right? It's part of how I refill my creative well is through
Yeah.
those ordinary bits of magic that are everywhere all around us.
I love that. I love that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
This morning I was walking my boys to school and we had a frost last night
Yeah.
and the little grassy meadow area out behind our house is just completely white. And they're like, Dad, this makes us think about it snowing and stuff. It's like Christmas. And I'm like, yeah, it does. And then we walked through the field and I took them to their stop and they headed out to school. And when I came back, I saw our footprint all leading back to the house through the
Wow.
frost. And there was just something about that, just in that moment of seeing their little feet next to mine and us walking together through that frosty field. And it was magical. It was really a magical thing. And um, hopefully our stories, your stories, give people a chance to slow down enough
Yep.
so that they can appreciate those moments and see the magic in them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's one thing I think about sometimes. My author tagline is magic is real and justice is worth fighting for.
Yeah.
And the thing that, sometimes I can start to feel, oh, I'm not doing enough to help other people in the world right now. There's so much suffering every day. But then I think of the art, the music, and the stories that help my soul on
Yeah.
a daily basis. And I think, why do I ever think my work isn't doing that for other people? The world desperately needs creativity and that sense of magic. And so I love that your company is called Believe in Wonder.
Yeah.
It's a reminder, it's also an admonishment. It's like,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to get bogged down. And so I love that sense that, no, today I'm going to believe in wonder
Yes.
It's
and
a
I'm going
call.
to share that.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
call to action because if you say it, then you're like, oh well, what does that mean? And then you kind of dive into that. You kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
what does that mean? What does that mean to me? And how do I interact with that?
Yeah. I think sometimes engaging with the title sometimes is an act of exploring wonder in and of itself too, because people have to think to themselves, what does it mean? What is wonder to me?
Mhm.
And I had this conversation with somebody the other day where, I grew up in a very uh kind of traditionally Christian household. And since then, I've explored so many different, philosophies and walks of faith and that kind of thing. But I didn't realize when I was a kid, they used to be like, fear of God, fear of all these things. And I was like, I never really could connect with that. I never could connect with the idea of being fearful.
Yeah.
But then I went and I looked at the actual original translation, and the original translation actually meant wonder and awe. So it's
Yeah.
like so it's like the idea of looking at the universe and looking at the day to day and seeing it for all of its kind of intricacy and its beauty. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I wish somebody had told me that when I was a kid, because it changes your perspective. And hopefully that when we talk about these things with um even
Anyone.
adults and adults and kids and anybody that feels like they need to connect with that creative spirit, that opens their mind to some of those beautiful realities. Because I feel like everybody right now, especially, needs to explore some kind of creative outlet, some kind of way
Hmm.
of making. I feel like imaginative creativity is one of the most human things that you can do.
Yeah. I know that you both share a lot of creativity with community, not just through the coloring books and the graphic novels and the art and the stories, but also you go out and do chalk art on sidewalks at community fairs, and you get people involved in active creativity in community. Can you talk a little bit about how that feels to you, why you do it?
Well, we so our community that we live in is this intergenerational community, and the way we feel like we give back to our community is um, to bring ourselves, our authentic selves, to the community, and um, and show up in that type of way. So we bring chalk art to our meadow. We bring opportunities to sit and chill and do a craft. We Because it feels like people forget that that's like something that we need as
Yeah.
humans. The fun, the I'm gonna do this to feed myself, to feed my soul, to make me happy and bring a smile to my face. And so I feel like that's what we bring, and that's bringing those things and reminding people about that, about your whatever it is that brings you joy, to focus on that for like 10-20 minutes. I feel like that's what we bring, that's what we give to the community, because then it gives them also a chance to check in and fill their cups up, and be able to have whatever it is to give out to the world again too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we get these great opportunities where we can partner with different organizations and go out to festivals and events and stuff like that, and the table, and to do that kind of stuff. But at the core of it, we're foster parents, and we've had a lot of great opportunities to learn about um, trauma informed care, and just helping people to kind of deal with some of the tougher realities of life, and just especially since we work with children of a certain age, and how they process those traumas and stuff. And one of the greatest ways to do it is through the creative process.
Exactly.
And I feel so just honored and blessed every day that we got our boys, Victor and Cam, and we get to see that creativity kind of flourish in them, and how that it helps them to process the truths of their lives and of their past, and help them to craft their own futures, because they see themselves as the heroes of their own stories.
Wow.
And Victor in particular, he's like, he knows he's going to be a leader, and he knows he's going to like help other people, because literally he sees himself as being this kind of like a paragon of people. And I'm like, well, you go for it, brother. I love it. You make it work. Well, Kamari he's more of our kind of solitary monk. He's kind of like, he's contemplating the universe, and we're like, that's a good path too. And just seeing it in children reminds you as an adult that lives inside of you still.
Yeah.
It never goes away. I keep the 12-year-old version of myself alive inside of me all the time. I feed him cartoons and sugar cereal, and um you know and we connect on a regular basis. So I feel like giving people the allowance to say, yeah, I'm going to embrace that. you know Today I'm going to buy me a bowl of ice cream, and I'm going to sit here and read a
Color
color in a coloring book and just be happy with it,
Yeah.
or put my hands in some dirt and, plant some daisies. Either way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. So, speaking of practice, are there other practices that keep you centered and keep you going that you do on a regular basis, whether they're creative practices, spiritual practices, both? What helps you in this tough world? And I know your lives are not easy. I know you have challenging lives, right?
Yeah.
In your challenging lives, what are the practices that keep you centered around that sense of wonder and creativity, or that just help you day to day?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. I sketch. I sketch a lot. I mean, I've got tons of sketchbooks, and it's centering, and it's strangely meditative and kind of prayerful too, which is because there's really no I don't have a lot of discussion of spirituality in my work, but the act of doing it feels like connecting with something bigger.
Yeah.
So I will sit and I will fill up a sketchbook with whatever. If I'm stressed, I draw a lot of dragons. I draw dragons all the time, and they're usually like old and wizened, and they've got long mustaches and monocles and things like that, and they're sitting in libraries drinking tea. And for some reason, that's very settling to my spirit. And I do that. And sometimes I'll do it while I'm in the middle of conversations with people. I just have to let them know ahead of time. Look, I'm totally engaged. I'm hearing everything you're saying, but I'm drawing a dragon right now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
please don't take offense.
And for me, I think I learned early on that I like to give back, give of myself. And so being able to reach young people, I think that's the reason why we made when we considered making a business that our focus was on the underrepresented and changing the narrative around fostering and adopting, because those if it feels so those stories are so kind of hopeless or heavy, and it's super hard to find your joy in those places,
Right.
and it's super hard to access your fun-loving child in those situations. And
Right.
so if I can reach a young person who's in that situation and say, look, yeah, you're in a foster care situation, but you're still a child. You still should go have that ice cream and play hopscotch and learn how to draw or crochet or do whatever that makes you happy. I'm going to tell you to do it. I'm going to advocate for you to have that fun because our span as young people, as little people, is so short, and we
Yeah.
expect so much of our children that allowing them to be kids and just enjoy childhood
Yeah.
is so rare. And that shouldn't be the case, it shouldn't
Yeah.
be. So that's where I find my joy, is to be like, hey, you know what, I am a big kid, and I'm not too cool to say that I'm not going to color in this coloring book. So join me in coloring,
or play some
or let's play some video games. Let's do something that is fun for you. So that's how we became Believe in Wonder, where we have that, and so I can show, hey, my character Zora is a foster child, but also she's going on these adventures too.
Yes. She's user
I love that.
Yes.
I mean, you haven't said this word, but the thing I'm hearing is instilling a sense of wonder, joy, and creativity in yourselves and in other people is also an act of healing,
It is.
Yes.
right?
is.
It's an act of repairing things that might be torn or feel broken.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I mean, in addition to being healing, it's a form of resilience too.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people right now have very rigid mindsets where it's
Mhm.
like anything that comes into their world that is outside of their understanding of it, their minds don't have the latitude and flexibility to absorb new information. So instead of bending and flexing with realities, it breaks. And then
Mhm.
that fracture causes discord and anger. Um, Creativity gives you that flexibility of mind to say, be like, okay, well, here's a person that comes from a different walk of life and they've had different experiences, and you can kind of bend and flex and absorb new information. And then that changes and broadens your worldview too.
Mhm.
So it gives you a certain level of resiliency in a world that's changing super fast too. And um, I think that's the beauty of young people and kids, is that you're built with that flexibility and resilience because it's a matter of survival too. So you're adjusting to all kinds of new information. And for some reason, we think to ourselves as adults that you're going to get to a point where, nope, it's all locked in now.
Yeah.
Encouraging people to be like, no, no, we still have to keep that flexibility of mind. It not only heals, traumas that have happened, but it prepares you for any kind of storms that are coming, and any possibilities of things coming into your life that are outside of your realm of understanding.
I think that's the reason why I like the term lifetime learner.
Yeah.
Mhm.
people, people are that we don't say that as much because people don't want to feel like they have to keep learning things. But if you give yourself the opportunity to be a lifelong long learner, then you are inviting in more information. You're inviting in a way to broaden your horizon and be a more open individual. And I think we're losing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Yeah. One of my practices is curiosity.
Mm,
yeah.
Um, and as soon as I start to tell myself I can't do something or I'm resisting something, I take a breath, I recenter, and I invoke curiosity
mm,
and
Yes.
say, how can I apply curiosity to this thing that feels really hard right now? How can I open my imagination, including like running a business,
Yeah.
or dealing with some of the pain in the world? Well, if I can invoke curiosity, it creates an opening, and
Yeah.
mm,
that feels magical to me.
I
mm-hmm.
love that.
Yeah.
I love that. It opens that door to that inquisitive person that's inside of you, that's longing to know new things. And um I love that, especially when it comes to um learning about different cultures and people from different walks of life. I mean, engaging that curiosity, it allows you to ask questions, to want to know, have a deeper understanding of what they've experienced. And I feel like it just broadens you as a human being, not only creatively, but like spiritually, mentally, so many different facets of just your humanness. Um, yeah.
Well, yeah, I agree with it all because when we are young and we're toddlers, one of the first things we learn is why.
Why?
Yeah.
Why. And
I
that's
love
a
you, but why?
yeah. And so that's a curiosity. You need to be able to bring in the information so that you can learn and adapt to your surroundings. So yeah,
Yeah.
you need to always have that.
Yeah. Um, We do that. We do it a lot here at our house, and I realize why my parents never wanted to be very access our curiosity is because it is extra work because they will ask for explanations for everything. It's like, break
Yeah.
that down, Dad. It's like, you're doing taxes. Explain to me taxes. Yes. What are taxes? And I'm like, okay. But I feel like it does something amazing for your soul, for you to be open and receptive to all the things that life has in store for you.
Well, and it certainly has been part of healing my childhood trauma, right? Because my childhood trauma, one of the results was it made me want to try to control my environment, right?
Yeah.
Because I never knew what random violent thing was going to happen. And
Yeah.
so that made parts of me more rigid.
Yeah.
And so the act of invoking curiosity heals some of that trauma retroactively. So I can move forward and become a more creative, fecund person.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I mean, that's amazing that you're able to access painful experiences, painful memories, and be able to. I mean, I don't know where I read it the other day, but someone that was spoke that creatives and artists, they're like filters where all of the gunk of life can go through a creative person and it comes out and they kind of purify it. They can take this kind of darkness and then take the darkness and make it a functional thing. You can process physical pain, past traumas, and by processing it into a creative act, it becomes something that someone can engage with and find healing. And I feel like that more so than anything. I mean, like right now, we need more people who are creatively active in the world because there's a lot of trauma to process, and we need more avenues for it, more sustainable avenues for it, so that we can, collectively process a lot of that trauma.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. I hit a nerve there. That's a nerve. We all hit a nerve. We collectively hit a nerve there.
Yeah, I feel the big pause now in the conversation, but it's important,
Yeah.
Right now, everyone on Earth, regardless of our condition, is living through some form of trauma. Some of us clearly a lot worse than others, right?
Yeah.
I am not living in an active war zone.
Yeah.
I am not a refugee, etc. But our consciousness still is filtering that trauma.
It is.
And so the act of creativity and curiosity and remembering the wonder in the world helps bring us back together so we can collectively heal in ways that just aren't possible otherwise, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's and I love how you phrased it where it is kind of a collective consciousness too, where it's like, well, we feel like we have a very small realm of influence. Even within that small realm of influence, the creative acts that you're doing are making broader healing gestures, and it really does put you in a headspace of realizing that even if your work is even for a small audience, that act of them experiencing it and engaging with it and stuff, it has ripple effects.
Yep.
So yeah. And I mean, I feel like more often than not, what we end up doing, since we do engage with a lot of younger audiences and stuff like that, is empowering them to hold on to that level of curiosity, of wonder, and creative engagement so that they can carry that with them into adulthood.
Yeah.
And I know that there's a lot of us right now, Gen Z, millennials, that we come from a mindset of abandoning your creative urges for a more, I guess they say, adult and mature way of looking at the world. And we're getting to adulthood and thinking, oh man, I feel like I lost something important, and we're having to re-engage with it as adults. And I'm like, just imagine a generation that never let it go.
Yeah.
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 And how that ripple effect will continue to ripple throughout if we can just continue to focus on and process and then put out, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that type of thing
Yeah.
compounded. It's healing for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a
Beautiful.
beautiful vision. I like
Mm.
the thought of future generations feeling more whole because they haven't given up their creative spark.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many walks of life where I don't think that people realize that they're engaging their creativity. Um, I when I get to talk to young people and I show them my sketchbooks and stuff like that, they'll be like, "Well, I don't draw very well, and I don't think I'm an artist." And I'm like, "Well, what do you like to do?" And they're like, "Well, I like soccer." I'm like, "Playing soccer well is an art form." You
Yeah.
know, if you've seen these photos of people in movement while they're playing soccer, that is not only a skill, that is art. It's like, well, I like to work on my skateboard, and I'm like, that's an art. You know, the engineering and that craft, that mechanical mindset, that is an art form. And if people, I think, could learn to realize that the things that inspire them and they want to like truly and wholly kind of engage with are all creative acts, then I think that we can change the dialogue about creativity as well. I actually had somebody come up to me and they said, "Well, I make um like I weave blankets, so it's not really a creative thing; it's more of a crafty
Oh
thing."
my gosh.
And I'm like, "What? What? That is so crazy." And because I'm like, you're picking colors, you're picking fabrics, you're being very specific about materials. And I've seen my wife crochet. It is
Mhm.
both physics and high end math and enigma code and handicraftedness, and it's so many things kind of wrapped up in it, and also this kind of zen centeredness too, which
Yeah.
is beautiful. And I do think that if we can change the dialogue so that people realize that so many things are on their basic level human and very creative and very artistic, then I think that we can engage people more
Yeah.
in the act of creativity.
Well, and that's one thing that our ancestors from every culture, it was baked in, right?
Yeah.
You you cooked,
Mhm.
you wove fabric, you knitted, you built walls, you made baskets, right?
Yeah,
Art was not divorced from ordinary life
yeah,
in the
Yeah.
early days of humanity,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
industrialization has caused a greater and greater divide between how
Hmm.
we think of creativity and how we think of ordinary life. And so
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
love to hear both of you talking about, no, let's bring that back together and
Oh,
reclaim that part of our humanity.
oh yeah,
Mhm.
without a doubt.
Definitely.
I mean, as a kid, I always thought to myself, I was like, originally I thought either I'm going to be, I thought I was going to be a pastor for a second, and then I was like, no, I don't want to do that. It's too much, too rigid. And then the other thing I thought I was going to be was a blacksmith, and I was like,
Oh,
wow. I mean, I've done so much research on it. The idea of it's such an art form. It's a beautiful
yeah,
art form because it's once again, it's about appreciating and dealing with raw materials, understanding where they come from and how best to utilize them. There's creativity, there's engineering, there's science, all of that stuff all kind of wrapped together in one thing. But I spoke about it with a group of high schoolers recently, and one of them didn't think that blacksmithing was an art form, and I was like, oh my God, how can it not be, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And just really just engaging with him on that level and having him realize that it's a legitimate career. It's something that, he could definitely do as a profession, but also that it was a creative outlet, and that it was something that had a place and had some value and credibility. And he was just like, and the look on his face was, yeah, it was like, boom.
Mind blown. As a child, two of my favorite things to watch were bricklayers and cement layers.
Oh yeah.
I was fascinated by them. It was such a meditative and creative act, and something in me really responded to that, because man, if you've ever watched a cement layer, it is an art form. The way they sweep everything clean and smooth, it's astonishing.
It's so amazing to see someone that is totally dialed in on
Yes.
their craft, to watch them work. It's
fully present.
fully present. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get lost in watching bakers make croissants.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It's like, witches, you're like, that's magic. I see you making croissants. That looks like magic.
It is.
So
it is.
I think that's what we need, again, to as a society, to get back to those things where, like you said, we cook together, we tell stories to each other, we dance together, because dancing was a good part of family life, celebrations and things like that. And as everybody has to have 3 jobs and all that stuff, and it's lost. And so some of those things we need to be intentional about, making sure that we bring that back into our lives.
Wherever you can.
Mm-hmm.
When I take the boys to drop them off in the morning, we have 2-minute dance parties.
Yep. Dance party.
Yeah. I'm like, if anybody's getting worked up, or if we're getting like, everybody's getting unsettled, and be like, all right, 2-minute dance party. We'll go, dance party, dance party. And we're doing it by the street as cars are going by. And we get like some honks every now and then. But I realized that as a kid, when I was at like a dance at school, and that idea of being afraid to go out and express yourself in a public place, I realized my kids will never have that. Nope. Because we'll do a random dance party, and they'll be able to
random scream too.
Yeah. Family scream.
That's great. I love it. I love that you're instilling both yourselves and other adults and the next generations with this sense of joy, wonder, and creativity. And I want to thank you so much for joining me in this conversation. Do you have any last thoughts before we close?
I don't know.
My last thoughts are just to find that thing that you love to do and encourage yourself to do it, and then also encourage that in others.
Yeah. And if you have a thing that you enjoy, that you wholly feel invested in, don't feel afraid to share it, because it comes to life when you share it with people.
And they feel your joy with it.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you again so much, Brian and Josie Parker of Believe in Wonder. And you can find them at believeinwonder.weebly.com. And you can find me at thorncoyle.com. And I hope everyone has a magical, creative day. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. And if you would like to support this series and future podcasts, please join me at patreon.com/thorncoyle. That's THORNCOYLE.